What is up, Chuck? The study prep guy is back with you today. It has been a relatively long time. So, welcome back, everyone. The study prep guy is back with you. For tonight, we'll be taking a look at the Guyana provisional license preparations in relation to the letter of competence to be received. Just a bit of a note is that usually in these test settings like this, there is a 50% chance that you either pass or either fail. So the chances of actually passing is relatively not relatively low because 50% is still a good percentage to be blatantly honest. We did look on the part V in the last video. For today, we'll be looking at the license of drivers and provisions as to disqualification of drivers and endorsements of license. We're looking at the things that could actually make you be disqualified from actually having the important components of a license. So, how do you get, or how do you actually have, or how do you obtain the provisional license? There is three major requirements. Usually, when you go into the GRA segment or you're going to GRA, there's usually three basic requirements that are needed in order to obtain the license. You need usually your ID, and then you usually need your ID and the letter of competence and two passport size pictures. That's the basic adjudications to actually obtain it. And that's very much try basic, to be honest. However, the most difficult aspect in the whole procedure is the letter of competence. The letter of competence is usually issued by a certified officer or some officer in that regard. However, there is mainly two ways, at least in Guyana, and I will say something that hopefully don't get me in trouble by any means. There are usually two ways, two tri-basic ways, or bilateral, tri-basic, whatever you want to say. There are two ways of getting the license in Guyana. And one of the ways, a lot of persons will have to disagree with me, and a lot of you guys won't want to be seen, especially in Guyana. There are two ways. You could go through the normal procedure, meaning that you study, you come on this video, you study, you learn what is required to actually obtain the license. And then there is the second way. And when I mean go through the normal procedure, written exam, you take the practical assessment, etc., etc. However, there is a shortcut method, an illegal, an illicit method that is usually utilized. This method, you won't find this in any document. You won't find this in any source. Um, it's something called bribery. At least in Guyana, that is very much prominent. Paying off police to actually obtain it. The letter of competence is mandatory by law and state. You only get it through going through the narrow procedures, meaning that you take the practical exam, you do the practical test, you get it. And then there's a second way, which is you pay a huge amount of fees or you pay a huge amount of bribery money and you obtain the license or you obtain the letter of competence. Because once you obtain the letter of competence, you basically get the provisional license. If you just get your competence, that's all you need to actually get your provisional license. Everything else is very much basic. So let's start on the study segment. Excuse me. 23 1, a person shall not drive a motor vehicle on a road unless he is the holder of employ any person drive a motor vehicle on a road employed is the holder of a driver license, and if any person acts in contravention of this section, he shall be guilty of an offense. This is in relation to the point that I was just stating. At least you could see the exact notes. And I just hope that no police is watching me out there, especially from Guyana, and you don't say anything in the comments. But if at least a police in this case, the legality of laws in Guyana is not straight. It is not that much adjudicated. It's not 100% right. And in most cases, I would say 99% of the cases, even if a police is caught in the act of bribery, meaning that the person is not qualified to obtain a letter of competence, but they paid a huge amount of fee to get it. Um, and the police is found out of this bribery and this theft. They, in most cases, they will not even be charged. They will just write it off and say that they're right and you're wrong. That's just how the judicial system works in this country. And secondly, any person driving a motor vehicle on a road, including any person who supervises that person while driving, shall, on being so required by a police constable, produce his license for examination so as to enable the police constable to ascertain the name and address of the holder of the license, the date of issue and authority by which it was issued, and if he fails so to do so, he shall be guilty of an offense. Third, any person producing his license under the procedural subsection shall, if requested to do so, declare his present address, and if he refuses, shall be guilty of an offense. And this segment is pertaining to conditions governing grants of driving license. 24. A person to drive a motor vehicle shall not be granted to any applicant unless he satisfies a licensing officer that is either at some time past the prescribed test of competence to drive or at any time before the commencement of this act held a certificate in Guyana vehicle of the class or description which he would be authorized for to drive. We have 20. For the purpose of enabling applicants for the grant of a license to learn to drive a motor vehicle with a view to the prescribed test, the licensing authority may, if so require him, and on payment of the prescribed fee, grant him a provisional license upon such terms and conditions and for such period and in such form as may. Then this is the second point. If any person to whom such a provisional license is granted fails to comply with any of the conditions subject to which it is granted, he shall be guilty of an offense. Test of competence to drive a motor vehicle shall be conducted by a certifying officer in the prescribed manner and on payment of the prescribed fee, usually obtain the letter of competence, meaning that in order to write the written assessment for the letter of competence, there are usually two stages, which is the written assessment and the practical assessment, the in-field assessment, where they see how you actually drive. We have 27I on an applicant for the grant of a driver's license. The applicant shall make a declaration in the prescribed form as to whether or not he is suffering from any such disease or physical disability as may be specified in the form, or any other disease or physical disability which would be likely to cause the driving by him of a motor vehicle, being a vehicle of such a class or description as he would be authorized by the license to drive, to be a source of danger to the public. Secondly, if from the declaration it appears that the applicant is suffering from any such disease or disability as for said, the certifying officer shall refuse to grant the license, provided that a license limiting invalid carriage may be granted to the applicant if the certifying officer is satisfied that he is fit to drive such carriage. The applicant may accept, in the case of such diseases and disabilities, may be prescribed a payment of the prescribed fee. Meaning that in the case that you are sick or you are ill or some disability does occur, but you are still able to move to such an extent as to drive a carriage, you will still have to pay an additional fee. Test proves his fitness to drive vehicles of a particular construction or design only. The license shall be limited to driving of such vehicles, meaning that usually in the four beginning stages of actually driving a vehicle, you will be applicable to three classes. The first class, the DRV license, motorcycle and tractor. Three precise classes that you will usually have in those beginning stages. Test proves his fitness to drive vehicles of a particular construction or design only. The license shall be limited to the driving of such vehicles. If on the application for the grant of a license by a person who is at the commencement of this act is the holder of a driving certificate under the repealed Motor Vehicles Act 1932. These these pints of AB terms that just add to the prescribed terms, you know that it's quite redundant, and you don't really need to reach all of that vanity in a sense. If it appears to the certifying officer that there is a reason that any person who holds a license suffering from a disease, we just read that, that's just totally redundant. I don't know why they had to repeat it. Subject to this part, the licensing officer, except in the case of an applicant who is disqualified as here, shall, on payment of the prescribed fee, grant a license to any person who applies for it in the prescribed manner and makes a declaration in the prescribed form that he is not disqualified by reason of age or authorized from obtaining a license for which he is applying. Provided that no fee shall be payable by any police, constable, or member of the Guyana Defense Force who is required to drive in the course of his duty any motor vehicle which is the property of the state. Sin shall be in the prescribed form, and where under this part the applicant is subject to any restriction with respect to the driving of any class of motor vehicle. The extent of the restriction shall be specified in the prescribed manner on the license. Subject to the provisions of this Act with respect to provisional license, a licensing fee, unless previously revoked or surrendered, remain in force until the birthday of license holder in the third following year of issue. A lot of no's. Anyways, we could do this. Some of the redundant. I don't know why they're just so redundant. Like, anyways, guys, we'll take a close right there. We will start on section VI in the next video. With that said, guys, see you out on the next video. My hair is crazy long right now, so I have to wear a hat. With respect to that, guys, see you out on the next video.